Good morning and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep. Welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's take a look at the topics we're going to discuss today. I have chosen 6 important articles from today's The Hindu newspaper. We have 3 articles for a detailed discussion. All the 3 are from international relations. And we have some very important topics to discuss. Then we also have 3 small articles for your prelims. So let's cover all these topics in detail so that you don't have to go back and waste your time in reading the newspaper. So I hope you guys are liking these initiatives. Do let us know by pressing the like button, share your comments, and do share these videos with other aspirants as well. So let's begin with today's discussion by looking at this editorial on page number 6. This editorial deals with the BRICS grouping and the 15th summit of BRICS that was held a few days ago at Johannesburg in South Africa. If you guys remember, last week I had discussed the BRICS grouping in complete detail right before the 15th summit. Throughout this week we have had many discussions regarding the developments at the 15th BRICS summit. So this editorial is providing us a detailed analysis of the biggest development at the BRICS summit, which is the upcoming expansion of the BRICS. At the 15th summit, the member countries, that is Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, they have approved the addition of 6 new member countries. Essentially, in one decision, the membership of this group is being doubled, more than doubled, from the current 5 members to 11 members. So 6 new countries will be joining the BRICS, thus making it one of the most important multilateral organizations. So in this context, we should examine the relevance of BRICS, because the relevance of BRICS has often been under question, especially Western countries, Western experts. They've often questioned whether BRICS is a relevant grouping. They've cast a shadow on the very effectiveness of the grouping. So it's important to understand how relevant is the group, how does it compare with Western groupings like the G7, and what lies ahead for BRICS. What will happen with the addition of new members, and what issues persist, what shortcomings exist with this grouping. These are some key issues we need to analyze and discuss, as the topic could be very important for the mains examination. See, last year itself, BRICS had announced that it is open to accepting new members. When the BRICS grouping was set up back in 2009, initially it was limited only to Brazil, Russia, India and China. Then in 2010, South Africa was added as a new member. But after that, BRICS never spoke about any expansion of the grouping. But due to its growing profile and due to its growing significance in geopolitics, the BRICS countries decided to open up the door for membership. And as soon as this announcement was made that the countries are ready to accept new members, more than 40 countries from the global south showed interest in joining the BRICS. That itself highlights the relevance of BRICS as an organization. 40 developing small countries and underdeveloped countries have shown interest in joining BRICS, and at least 22 of them have submitted formal applications to join the BRICS. So BRICS has emerged as a champion of the global south. Global south refers to the developing nations and the underdeveloped countries. The BRICS grouping itself was formed as a grouping of 5 major emerging economies. And today these members of BRICS, they are providing leadership to the global south countries, and more than 40 countries are showing interest and 22 countries had applied for membership. So out of them, 6 countries have been chosen at the 15th summit. And these 6 new members who are going to join by next year, they represent different regions and they bring their own uniqueness to the group, which adds to the strength of the organization. So let's take a look at the new members who are being admitted into BRICS. This could be very important for your prelims as well. And let's analyze the significance of inclusion of these members also for your mains. So from the West Asia region, the three biggest oil suppliers and the three biggest geopolitical powers, that is Iran, Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. These three countries are being included as members to the BRICS. From Africa, Egypt and Ethiopia are being added as new members. Egypt is not just a North African country, but it also plays a key role in West Asian geopolitics, along with Iran, Saudi Arabia and UAE. As you know, West Asia is very volatile. There are a lot of tensions in the region between various countries. There's a lot of sectarian divide. We have civil wars and a lot of terrorism as well in West Asia. So, four major powers from West Asia, that not just includes Iran, Saudi Arabia and UAE, but also the African country of Egypt, as it plays a key role in West Asian geopolitics. These countries are being added along with a Latin American country, that is Argentina. So with this, the membership of BRICS will increase to 11 countries, and these new members are expected to join very soon by January 2024. So now, based on this, let's talk about the relevance of the organization. Because as I told you, Western governments have always ridiculed BRICS. Western experts, Western media, they've always put a question mark on the relevance of BRICS because they point to the inner contradictions within the group. Western thinkers believe that BRICS as a grouping does not have coherence or a common agenda or a common objective which could weaken and derail the grouping. This is true to an extent because if you look at Brazil, India, South Africa, these are three democracies, whereas Russia and China are largely authoritarian countries. So the political systems are different, the economic systems are different, their commitment to human rights are different. So naturally, there are a lot of internal differences between the members. On several important global issues, they don't take the same stand. There is a divide, there is a difference that comes up between the BRICS members. So now with addition of new members like Iran, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Argentina, etc., there will be even more internal differences according to Western think tanks and Western governments. So in this context, the editorial says that BRICS as a grouping is definitely relevant and its significance is increasing further because of the addition of new members from the global south. The addition of 6 members is no doubt a big achievement for the grouping, and any doubts that were cast on the relevance of BRICS is being set aside because there is massive global interest in this grouping. If 40 countries from global south are showing interest, 22 countries are applying for membership, that itself highlights the relevance and significance of the grouping. So there is no doubt that BRICS as a grouping is aspirational for several countries from global south. Several developing countries, emerging economies, they all want to join the grouping because they see a future in BRICS. So BRICS has definitely established itself as a counter narrative to Western dominated groupings and institutions such as the G7 grouping. If G7 is dominated by Western advanced economies, including US, West European powers, Japan, etc., then BRICS has emerged as a credible counter narrative, if not an alternative. If it's not an alternative or a replacement, at least it has emerged as a counter narrative creator where it is giving a platform for other countries to raise their views, to raise their opinions, especially to retain their strategic autonomy in their foreign policy to counter Western dominance. So in this regard, BRICS as a grouping is definitely relevant and extremely significant in global geopolitics. So the editorial provides us a comparison as well between BRICS and the G7 as to how they compare with each other. The editorial is of the opinion that BRICS has a list of achievements to its credit. It is these achievements and its initiatives which makes the BRICS a very, very important grouping. The editorial is pointing out that BRICS countries have made a lot of progress with regard to climate change cooperation. This is one area which the BRICS members have prioritized from the beginning, and they have declared very strong commitments to help out each other and work together in the field of climate change. That shows a common objective and a common vision of the BRICS members to work towards tackling global warming and climate change. The other major push by BRICS is to reform Western-dominated global institutions such as the World Bank and IMF, and as well as the United Nations. There has been consistent support within the BRICS to reform the World Bank, to reform the governance structure and the voting share of IMF, which has always favored Western powers like US and members of European Union. It's largely the Western economies which have dominated these global financial institutions, which has affected emerging economies like Russia, China, Brazil, India, and South Africa. In fact, this was the primary push which led these countries to form the BRICS as a counter-narrative to the Western-dominated World Bank and IMF. So with regard to reforming the World Bank and IMF, all the BRICS countries, they are on the same page. But when it comes to UN reforms and expansion of membership to the UN Security Council, except for China, the other BRICS members, they are on the same page. Brazil, India, they are part of an initiative called G4, where Brazil and India, along with Germany and Japan, they are together pushing for reforms of the UN, calling for expansion of membership of the UN Security Council. So other BRICS members like Russia and South Africa, they have supported the membership of India and Brazil. They have supported reforms of the UN. Whereas China is a standout. China has largely opposed UN reforms, primarily to prevent India and Japan from becoming permanent members. But in this regard, as far as reforming global institutions are concerned, BRICS countries, they do have a common agenda, except for China opposing UN reforms. Then along with that, BRICS countries have collectively rejected any kind of unilateral Western sanctions. Sanctions imposed by US and European countries, mainly on geopolitical grounds, has been strongly opposed and even bypassed by the BRICS members. For example, the sanctions that US imposed on Iran, Western sanctions on Russia, American sanctions on Venezuela. Such unilateral sanctions have been strongly opposed by all the BRICS members, and since all these countries follow their independent foreign policy, right? They oppose such unilateral sanctions and they've rejected these Western sanctions. So that's another issue where BRICS countries have taken a common stand. Then if you look at their biggest achievement, it is the establishment of the New Development Bank, or the NDB, which has emerged as a credible counter to the World Bank, and it has already started lending to more than 100 infrastructure and development projects around the world. Then the BRICS counter to IMF, which is the Contingent Reserve Arrangement, or CRA, it has already started functioning with a base capital of $100 billion, and it seems to be ready to help out countries that are facing a liquidity crisis or a financial crisis. So through these major initiatives, the BRICS has definitely established itself, and it has come out as a strong counter narrative to the Western dominated groups like the G7. The editorial also presents us a lot of important data to highlight the growing profile of BRICS as compared to the G7. Now, if you compare the wealth of the countries of BRICS and G7, of course, there is no comparison. The G7 countries are richer countries. They are developed Western advanced economies. So BRICS members may not rival the wealth of the G7 countries. But however, as a collective group, their percentage share of global GDP is more or less the same. If you take G7 members and measure their percentage contribution to global GDP, it's around 30% approximately. Similarly, if you take the contribution of the BRICS countries and their share in global GDP, it's approximately 30% as well. So as far as the global economy is concerned, BRICS countries are playing an equally important role as that of the G7. Then if you look at the representation of BRICS in terms of global population, BRICS has a more equitable representation as it accounts for 40% of the global population as compared to just around 10% of the G7 countries. The G7 advanced economies like US, UK, France, Italy, Japan, etc., Canada, they account for just 10% of the global population. Whereas the BRICS grouping represents 40% of the global population, thus providing for a more equitable representation. Now, the biggest development is that since new members are being added, especially West Asian countries are being added, 6 of the 10 biggest global oil suppliers will now be members of BRICS. Now please pay attention to this point. If you look at the top 10 global oil suppliers, you have Saudi Arabia, you have Russia, Iran, UAE, right? So out of the 10 top global oil suppliers, 6 of them will be a part of BRICS with its expansion, which means the grouping is going to play a critical role in energy geopolitics. The grouping also includes 2 of the biggest oil consumers in the world, that is India and China. India and China are the world's biggest importers of oil from major oil exporting nations like Saudi Arabia, Russia, Iran, etc. So as the group includes some of the top oil exporters and importers, this could very well become a platform to stabilize the global energy market, to play a critical role in energy geopolitics, thus securing the interests of these countries. This could further weaken Western dominance in the global oil markets. So this is what explains the growing profile and significance of this organization. But of course, there is a genuine shortcoming with BRICS. As pointed out by Western think tanks, Western experts, and even by Western governments, there is an inner contradiction within the group, and you can't ignore this. So this is the concern regarding BRICS. Internally, between the members, there are rivalries and differences which could break the grouping apart, or at least it might derail the initiatives of BRICS. For example, look at the tensions between India and China, the standing border dispute, the constant Chinese aggression against India, the breakdown of diplomatic relations, the unsustainable economic deficit, the trade deficit that China has against India. All these issues have derailed India-China relations, and of course it is affecting the functioning of BRICS. At the BRICS grouping, India-China do not share similar views and opinions on many critical issues. So their bilateral disputes are spilling over into the grouping. Similarly, the addition of Iran, Saudi Arabia and UAE could cause even more internal differences. Because Iran being a Shia power and Saudi and UAE being Sunni powers, they represent the sectarian divide in West Asia. They have had decades of geopolitical rivalry between them. And even though a tentative peace has been established recently between Iran and Saudi Arabia, in the future there is no guarantee that the peace will hold. Recently, China mediated a settlement between Iran and Saudi Arabia that has led to the resumption of diplomatic ties between the two West Asian powers. But in the future, their rivalries, their disputes and tensions might come back, and this could derail the functioning of BRICS itself. So this is definitely a major concern. The other major problem is that some countries of BRICS, especially Russia and China, since they have a open stand against the West, they might try to push for a overtly political statement in order to set up the BRICS as an anti-Western alliance. Right? Russia, China have already made those attempts. Since they have intense rivalry with US and Western countries, they might try to establish BRICS as an anti-Western alliance, and this could become problematic for the other members who balance their relations between the West and Russia and China. For example, India, Egypt, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, all these countries, they strike a balance between the Western countries and Russia and China. They don't take sides usually. They try to take a neutral path. They try to protect their respective interests. So if BRICS is projected as an anti-Western alliance by Russia and China, if such statements are made and if such initiatives are taken, it will make the other members very uncomfortable, causing the derailment of the grouping. Also, if you look at major global issues, be it the Russia-Ukraine war, or be it tackling terrorism. On all these critical issues and strategic issues, BRICS countries don't share the same viewpoints. If you look at Russia-Ukraine war, the BRICS countries never voted as a bloc to either support Russia or to criticize Russia. While China was seen to be backing Russia, India took a more neutral stand. It tried to abstain from any UN votes. Brazil followed a similar approach, whereas South Africa has been more proactive in criticizing Russia, and even it has faced a challenge in arresting Russian President Putin if you were to visit the country for the BRICS summit, because there is an arrest warrant issued by the International Criminal Court against Russian President Putin. So, on the issue of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the BRICS countries, the other BRICS members, have not taken a similar stand. They have been divided. They have not voted as a bloc to either support Russia or to criticize Russia. So this difference clearly shows the lack of strategic coherence within the grouping. But the biggest concern in the group is the rising aggression of China, where it is trying to overpower the group and enforce its strategic and economic vision on the other countries. China is trying to dominate the BRICS. It is trying to use BRICS as a platform to target the West and target the US. It is trying to push its economic agenda and strategic agenda into the grouping. So India, even Russia for that matter, and all the other members, they are not comfortable with that. So these internal differences and contradictions could derail the group, and that is a concern being expressed by the editorial. So as a conclusion, what we can suggest is that, one, the BRICS members have to firmly push back against China's attempts to overpower the group. Because BRICS was set up as a fair and equitable platform which would give a equal space for all the members. The whole idea of BRICS was to be different from the Western countries, where they dominate certain institutions like World Bank, UN and IMF. If China is trying to do the same, if it's trying to replicate Western behavior at BRICS just to push its interests, then it defeats the very purpose of the organization. The very fundamental idea of BRICS was shared prosperity. That is the reason why so many countries are interested to join the group. It promises equitable development, equal opportunities for all the members. It promises the promotion of democratic model of governance. Right? That's why 40 plus countries are interested in applying for the membership. But if China is trying to overpower the group, that will defeat the very fundamental idea of BRICS. So the editorial is suggesting that the other members have to push back against China's attempts to overpower the group, and internally they have to resolve their differences. For example, India, China have to resolve the border dispute. They have to reduce their tensions. Similarly, Iran and Saudi Arabia, Iran and UAE, they have to maintain the recent peace which has been established. They have to maintain moderate, friendly relations without allowing rivalries and tensions to take over the relationship. So internally, they have to address these contradictions and push back against Chinese attempts to overpower the group. That is when BRICS will survive and emerge as a strong grouping that could offer a counter-narrative to Western-dominated institutions. So I feel this topic is very, very important, given that 6 new countries are joining the group. So you can expect a mains question where UPSC might ask you to examine the relevance and the internal contradictions of the BRICS grouping. Now let's move on to an equally important topic which has been reported on page number 12. This article refers to the China-Bhutan boundary dispute. According to the article, China and Bhutan have held a first meeting with regard to delimitation of their disputed boundary. So let's examine this topic in detail. It's a very, very important topic that has a direct implication for Indian interests. The context is that China and Bhutan have recently met in Beijing. Their expert group meeting has taken place in Beijing just a few days back to try and find a solution to their long-standing boundary dispute. Both the countries have agreed to accelerate the ongoing negotiations, and there are signs that the boundary dispute might be resolved very soon. Especially in the last 8 to 10 months, there have been a lot of developments in this regard, where China, Bhutan, both of them are accelerating the boundary negotiations. and they're looking to find a quick solution to resolve the standing boundary dispute. So these talks regarding the boundary dispute between China and Bhutan has a direct impact on Indian interests. India is definitely an interested party regarding how these negotiations will proceed. Is that clear? So let's understand this topic in detail. Let's see where the disputes are present. Let's see what is Bhutan's stand, what is China's stand, what's the history behind the dispute, and how does India get affected by the negotiations which are going on. See, this map over here clearly depicts the three locations where China and Bhutan have a standing boundary dispute. Just like China has disputed its borders with India and all the other neighbors, similarly, China has failed to recognize the boundaries with Bhutan as well. This is again a relic of the colonial era, right? These were the colonial boundaries between British India and Tibet, the Kingdom of Tibet. But after China annexed Tibet in 1950, overnight China started sharing boundaries with these Himalayan countries, including India, Nepal and Bhutan. So since 1950, China has disputed the validity of these colonial era boundaries. That is what leads to the India-China border dispute from Ladakh to Arunachal Pradesh. On similar lines, China has disputed the validity of its borders with Bhutan, and there are three locations where the two countries have a standing dispute. Please make a note of these locations. China and Bhutan have a dispute towards the western sector of the border at a place known as Doklam. You might have heard about the Doklam Plateau or the Doklam Bowl. It's present at the tri-junction of India, Bhutan and China. This is where India's Sikkim meets with the Chumbi Valley of Tibet and Bhutan on the other side. It's a tri-junction point where three countries, that is India, China, Bhutan, intersect. At this strategic location known as Doklam Plateau or the Doklam Bowl, China and Bhutan have a standing dispute. This is essentially Bhutanese territory under Bhutan's control, but China has been claiming the territory and it has repeatedly used aggression, military aggression, to try to change the status quo at Doklam. Because of this Chinese aggression at Doklam, it even led to a military dispute where India-China entered into a military standoff in 2017 over the Doklam dispute. I'll explain why India gets involved. How come the Doklam issue, which is between China and Bhutan, led to a military standoff between India and China? That's an obvious question. We'll come to that. I'll explain why India gets directly involved in the Doklam issue. So apart from the Doklam dispute, there are two other locations in the northern sector at Jakarlung and Pasamlung. Jakarlung is also known as Jamparlung. Alright, so at Jakarlung and Pasamlung in the northern sector, China, Bhutan have a standing dispute. So essentially, Bhutan shares a border of around 477 kilometers. And along this border, there are three locations where China has raised disputes. Now, let's keep this issue aside for a while and let's take a look at India-Bhutan relations. Since India gained independence and Bhutan also gained independence, both the countries have maintained very cordial relations. In fact, India-Bhutan share a model relationship and it's one of the most friendliest and the most trustworthy relationship in South Asia. Amongst all the neighbors, India has the best possible relationship with Bhutan. And this relationship is rooted in the 1949 Treaty of Peace and Friendship. Under this treaty, which defines India-Bhutan relations, Bhutan agreed to be guided by India in its foreign relations. Essentially, Bhutan outsourced its foreign policy to India. This arrangement existed until 2007, when the 2007 treaty was signed. So from 1949 till 2007, Bhutan agreed to be guided by India in its foreign policy. Why? Because Bhutan, being a small Himalayan kingdom, it felt that it won't be able to stand up against big powers like China. Bhutan felt the need for greater support from friendly countries like India. It also sought the defense of India. That is, it wanted India to ensure the defense of Bhutan. So through the 1949 treaty, India guaranteed the defense of Bhutan. India took the responsibility of defending Bhutan against external threats. That is why we have Indian troops stationed inside Bhutan. And in return, Bhutan agreed to be guided by India in its foreign policy so that India's core strategic interests along the Himalayan belt can be protected. The primary driving factor here was China's aggression, because by 1950 China would annex Tibet, and it further brought India-Bhutan closer because Bhutan was now extremely worried about Chinese aggression. If China could annex a large kingdom like Tibet, then Bhutan stood no chance. So from 1950 onwards, Bhutan got even more closer to India, and it outsourced its foreign policy to India, and in return sought India's security, India's defense, so that Bhutan's integrity can be protected against Chinese aggression. This was the close arrangement that India-Bhutan had established. This continued until 2007, when the treaty was revised and upgraded. And since 2007, Bhutan has been conducting its own foreign policy. As Bhutan became a prominent country, especially in the field of climate change, due to its commitment to happiness index, the National Happiness Index, due to its carbon neutral approach, right, and due to its focus on environment conservation, sustainability, Bhutan became very popular and prominent as far as climate change negotiations were concerned, and Bhutan felt the need to conduct its own foreign policy, just like any other sovereign country. So when Bhutan expressed this interest, India willingly agreed, right? India had no interest to force Bhutan to accept its guidance. So we revised and upgraded the treaty of 1949, and as a result, the 2007 treaty allows Bhutan to conduct its own foreign policy without seeking any guidance or approvals from India. Is that clear? So since then, Bhutan has been conducting its own foreign relations. But the most important point is that Bhutan has no official diplomatic ties with China. Not just China, in fact, with the P5 countries, with most of the global powers, Bhutan has no official diplomatic ties. It has diplomatic relations with very few countries like India, Nepal, Bangladesh, Thailand, and few others. Bhutan has deliberately stayed away from setting up ties with the P5 countries in order to ensure that India's interests are protected, to not allow big powers to play their geopolitics in the Himalayan region. And specifically, Bhutan has chosen not to set up ties with China because of their tensions and standing border dispute. Even today, China-Bhutan have no diplomatic relations. Then you might ask, how come the boundary negotiations are taking place? That is a standalone arrangement. To resolve the boundary dispute, a separate arrangement has been created. The boundary talks are taking place separately, and China-Bhutan have no diplomatic ties even today. Officially, they do not have diplomatic relations. So until 2007, India was guiding Bhutan, even with regard to its border talks with China. Because back in 1984, India helped Bhutan to establish a boundary mechanism with China. Under this mechanism, boundary talks were initiated between China and Bhutan, where India would be guiding Bhutan. And till 2016, 24 rounds of boundary talks have taken place. Please make a note of this. Until 2016, that is before the Doklam dispute, until then, from 1984, 24 rounds of boundary talks have been held between China and Bhutan, but still they had failed to reach a resolution. After 2017, boundary talks have not resumed. The 25th round of boundary talks has not taken place because of the Doklam incident. Because of the India-China military standoff at Doklam and heightened tensions, following that, boundary talks have not resumed. Is that clear? Now, the most important point to understand here is that back in 1990s, China had made a controversial proposal to resolve its boundary dispute with Bhutan. China's proposal was that China will retain the strategic Doklam Plateau, and in return it will give up its claims over Jakarlung and Pasamlung. Essentially, China had proposed an exchange of territory. China had suggested through the boundary talks that let's resolve this dispute. We will give away our claims on Jakarlung and Pasamlung. You keep those territories and other small enclaves. But in return, give us Doklam. This claim of China is what bothers India. This proposal of China to exchange these disputed areas as part of a negotiated settlement is what concerns India, because the Doklam Plateau is strategically extremely important to India. Please look at the map here. Please pay attention to this map. You can see where the Doklam Bowl is located in Bhutan, at the tri-junction of India, China and Bhutan. Right next to Doklam, you have the strategic Nathula Pass of Sikkim, which is a historical connection between Sikkim and Chumbi Valley of Tibet. Historically, Buddhism has traveled from the Indian subcontinent to China through the Nathula Pass. There's a lot of border trade that takes place as well here. Plus, from a military point of view and a strategic point of view, India and China have a strong military presence at this sector. Right at Nathula, we have a border meeting point where Indian Army meets with the Chinese PLA. Chinese PLA have a very strong military presence all across Chumbi Valley. And during the 1962 war, the Chinese troops had made deep inroads towards Nathula, and they even came quite close to the Siliguri corridor of India. Now, if you look at the map, you'll notice that the Doklam Plateau provides a vantage point, provides a vantage location to access and dominate the strategic Siliguri corridor and the Nathula Pass. The Siliguri corridor of India is called the chicken's neck of India. This is India's vulnerability. It's referred to as a strategic choke point because it's a narrow land corridor of India. Its width is hardly around 22 to 70 kilometers. It is sandwiched between Nepal and Bangladesh. It is surrounded by two international borders. And this is the only land connection between Northeast India and the rest of India. So since the 1962 conflict, India has always lived in fear that in case of a future conflict, if China were to impose a military blockade at Siliguri or capture Siliguri, this would cut off Northeast India from the rest of India. So this has always been a vulnerability for India, and India sees this as a strategic choke point. That's why it's called the chicken's neck of India. So given the proximity of Doklam to Siliguri and Nathula, India is very, very protective about Doklam, even though it's Bhutan's territory. Since India is still responsible for defending Bhutan, in 2017, when Chinese troops were illegally constructing a road at Doklam, the Indian Army objected to the road construction along with the Royal Bhutanese Army. This is what led to the military standoff at Doklam in 2017. In Bhutan's claimed territory, Chinese troops, the PLA troops, were seen to be constructing a road. So the Indian troops who were on patrol along with the Bhutanese forces, they opposed the road construction, and this is what led to clashes between Indian troops and Chinese troops. On both sides there were several injuries, and very quickly the tensions escalated, turning into a major military standoff. It was quite similar to the Ladakh clashes and the current ongoing military standoff in Ladakh. So this disrupted India-China relations, and since then India has been concerned about China-Bhutan boundary negotiations. Because of course Bhutan is interested to resolve the boundary dispute. There's nothing wrong with that. China recently raised a new claim as well. If you go back to the previous map, I'll show you one more location. In the eastern parts of Bhutan, here, you have a wildlife sanctuary called Sakteng Wildlife Sanctuary. This clearly belongs to Bhutan. China has no claims over it. But in 2020, when the Ladakh clashes were going on, when the Ladakh standoff was going on, China deliberately raised a claim over Sakteng Wildlife Sanctuary, claiming that this Bhutanese territory also belongs to China. This was a deliberate provocation to put pressure on Bhutan to break India-Bhutan friendly relations and compromise Indian interests. Because please understand the game plan of China. If China manages to put tremendous pressure on Bhutan and breaks the friendly ties between India and Bhutan, then Bhutan might be forced to accept the exchange of territory. right? Bhutan might feel at some point that instead of getting caught between India-China tensions, it would be better to give up Doklam territory to China and get Jakarlung and Pasamlung in return. So apparently this Chinese strategy is what worries India. Is that clear? So this week, the 13th expert group meeting between China and Bhutan was held at Beijing. This is a platform these countries have created to take forward the border negotiations. There are two different mechanisms that are guiding the border negotiations. There is an expert group meeting which takes place regularly. In the last 1 year itself, 4 such meetings have been held. It was during this meeting that the two sides have agreed to set up a joint technical team for delimitation of the China-Bhutan boundary. And they held a first meeting as well. This is apart from the boundary talks which are going on since 1984. Is that clear? The boundary talks that have been held since 1984, the 24 rounds which have been held, right? Apart from that, the two countries have set up an expert group meeting which is taking place regularly, especially in the last 1-2 years. And during the recent meeting, the 13th expert group meeting, they have decided to set up a joint technical team to carry out delimitation along the China-Bhutan boundary. Both the countries have agreed to fast track their negotiations to meet more regularly and achieve the implementation of a 3-step roadmap that they had agreed to in 2021 to permanently resolve the boundary dispute. Now, we don't know what the 3-step roadmap is. It's a classified document. The 3-step roadmap has never been made public. It was an agreement between China and Bhutan signed in 2021. 3 steps were identified to work towards resolving the boundary dispute. So now, one concern for India is that, will Bhutan fall under Chinese pressure? Will Bhutan agree for a possible exchange of territories where Doklam might be given away to China in return for Jakarlung and Pasamlung? If that were to happen, it will threaten Indian strategic interests because Doklam is strategically vital for India given its proximity to Nathula and Siliguri corridor. Is that clear? But experts believe this is unlikely to happen. Bhutan will never agree to such an exchange because Bhutan has been a trusted friend of India. It has been guided by India in its foreign policy for many decades. Even today, Bhutan depends on India for its defense, and India is the biggest investor in the country. Right? Bhutan's economy is heavily dependent on India. All essential supplies go from India. Indian tourists are a big source of revenue for Bhutan. So Bhutan is highly unlikely to break the trust. It's a trust-based friendship, and it's highly unlikely that Bhutan is going to break the trust where India is not kept in the loop. Even if some agreement is reached to resolve the boundary dispute, chances are that Bhutan will keep India in the loop. Bhutan will inform India and it will keep India on board before agreeing to a final settlement. Now the topic becomes extremely relevant because in the last 2 years, as I told you, these boundary talks have been fast-tracked. They have been accelerated. Regular meetings are taking place. Multiple rounds of talks are being held. And the 25th boundary talk might also take place very soon. So there is expectation that in the next few months or years, there might be a final settlement. And hence, India pays close attention to this negotiation as it affects our strategic interests. Is that clear? Now let's move on to the next topic from page number 9. This article refers to India's relations with Greece. I know it's a little vague topic because usually India-Greece relations are not a priority. But something big has happened. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has paid a historic visit to Athens, the capital of Greece. This is the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister in 40 years. The last time an Indian Prime Minister visited Greece was Prime Minister Indira Gandhi back in 1983. So this visit of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, right, it comes at a very critical point. It is very crucial as far as Eurasian geopolitics is concerned, and India has some major interests in Eurasia. After the BRICS summit, Prime Minister Modi has directly travelled to Athens, met with the Prime Minister of Greece and the Greek leadership, and several important agreements have been signed during the visit of the Prime Minister. This marks a major progress in India-Greece relations, And again, I feel it's a very, very important topic for both prelims and mains. Even though it's a unusual topic, given India's rising interest in Eurasia and the common interest we have with Greece, it's a very, very important topic given the developments that have taken place. So let's quickly examine India-Greece relations and why this relationship is important in the current times. If you look at the historical relationship, India and Greece share a civilizational relationship. This relationship dates back to more than 2,500 years. Right? The Mauryan Empire in India, one of the most stable and one of the largest Indian empires, right, had historical contact and linkages with the then Greek Empire. The Mauryan kingdom, which stretched all across the Indian subcontinent, all the way till Afghanistan, right, was in close contact with the Greek civilization and the Greek Empire, and you have evidence to prove that. Through coinages, writings, it's very clearly established that ancient India and Greece had very strong trade relations and cultural relations. In fact, Alexander the Great would later make an attempt to capture India and would get as close as the Indus Valley. Right? I'm sure you would have studied this in history. Alexander, as he marched eastwards, he would capture today's Afghanistan, parts of Pakistan as well, and fought intense battles with Raja Puru, of King of Paruva, near Indus Basin, along rivers such as Jhelum and Chenab. Right? But after this, Alexander would retreat and head back towards Babylon. But this conflict and the trade cultural relations mark a historical ancient linkage between the Mauryan Empire and the Greek civilization. Even if you look at our art and architecture, we share a lot of things in common. You have Indo-Greek architecture, right? Gandhara art. Please note down this point. Gandhara art, right, is believed to be influenced by both Indian influences and Greek influences. Then you have Indo-Greek architecture as well. We have several monuments in India and around the world which are influenced by Indo-Greek architecture. Then Chanakya, who was in the court of Chandragupta Maurya, records in the Arthashastra that the Greeks had an ambassador in the king's court by the name Megasthenes. Megasthenes was acting as the Greek ambassador in the Mauryan court, which again clearly points to historical trade and diplomatic relations between the then Mauryan Empire and the Greek Empire. So today, post-independence in modern times, we have built upon this historical relationship. Since 1947, India and Greece have been friendly to each other. Of course, we have gradually built the relationship. So over the last 70 odd years, India and Greece have come closer and they share common viewpoints. They have common geopolitical concerns. They have common interests in Eurasia and beyond. For example, Greece has always supported India's core foreign policy objectives. When India championed the non-aligned movement, Greece was supportive of that. When India established its policy of strategic autonomy and maintained an independent foreign policy throughout the Cold War, Greece was supportive and understanding of India's foreign policy priorities. With regard to counter-terrorism, with regard to maritime security, India and Greece share similar objectives. Is that clear? Because even Greece is facing few maritime threats, just like India. Is that clear? If China is a maritime security threat to India, similarly, Turkey has become a maritime security threat to Greece. If India is affected by terrorism, similarly, Greece also faces a concern because in the Caucasus region, in the South Caucasus is the region present near southeastern Europe, that is below Russia, next to Central Asia, and to the southeast region of Europe, to the southeast of Balkans. That region is the South Caucasus region. In the Caucasus, you have several terrorist organizations that have destabilized the region, and the security challenge here includes tackling terrorism and organized crime, because several terror groups are linked with criminal activities like drug trafficking, arms trafficking. So India, Greece have similar concerns, strategic objectives. So it's only natural for India and Greece to work together. So when Prime Minister Indira Gandhi visited Greece in 1983, it marked a landmark change in the relationship. And especially since then, in the last 40 years, the relationship has really grown. Now, the two countries are cementing this closeness in the relationship with the visit of Prime Minister Modi. In fact, India-Greece started establishing closer strategic ties by signing an agreement for defense cooperation back in 1998. Following this defense cooperation agreement, India started sending warships. The Indian Navy frequently started sending its warships into the Mediterranean to dock at a strategic port at Sauda Bay in Crete, the Crete island, which is present near the Aegean Sea. Right? This area is a disputed area between Greece and Turkey. Greece and Turkey have a long-standing maritime dispute near the Aegean and the Mediterranean Sea. You have a group of islands. I'll show you the map as well. So, at this strategic port at Sauda Bay, Indian Navy has sent its warships multiple times to work with the Greek armed forces. Then more importantly, Greece is very closely aligned with the Western security architecture. It is an integral part of the Western security architecture. Please make a note of this. It's a member of NATO. It's part of this military alliance with US and European countries. It's also a member of the European Union. Is that clear? So along with this, its strategic location in the Mediterranean and in the South Caucasus makes Greece a very, very important country. Now please look at the map here. This is Greece, this is Turkey. You have the Aegean Sea over here, the Mediterranean Sea over here. Between Aegean and Mediterranean, you can see a group of islands. Right? The Dodecanese Islands, the Crete Island, and the exclusive economic zone around these islands. They are disputed between Greece and Turkey. And Turkey has been very aggressive against Greece in this regard. They've had several military clashes as well. There has been constant tensions in the region, and Turkey is accused of violating the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Turkey is blamed for breaking international law and threatening the sovereignty of Greece over these islands and its exclusive economic zone. Is that clear? Along with the Greece-Turkey tensions, you should be aware of the role Turkey is playing in supporting Azerbaijan in the Caucasus region in the ongoing Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. You might have heard about the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Right? Between these two major Eurasian countries, you have a standing military dispute which is going on from many years. It's called the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. So Turkey has backed Azerbaijan completely in this conflict. Now, some of you might be concerned. What is India's interest here? How is India related to all of this? Turkey has become very hostile to India because of its nexus with Pakistan. For example, on issues like Kashmir, on India's internal matters like Citizenship Amendment Act, revocation of special status under Article 370 to Jammu and Kashmir, any violence in Jammu and Kashmir, any riots in India. In such internal matters of India, Turkey has been backing Pakistan and criticizing India, targeting India at global platforms like United Nations and Organization of Islamic Cooperation. At UN and OIC, Turkey has become openly hostile to India. It has supported Pakistan's position and it has been consistently voting against India. Now this is unacceptable to India because India saw Turkey as a good friend. For many years, Turkey was a good partner in West Asia. But as Turkey has turned against India due to its nexus with Pakistan and Azerbaijan, India is building a counter to it. This is the strategy that India has been following. We are working with Greece, Armenia and Cyprus. Even Cyprus has issues with Turkey. So India has gotten very, very close to Greece, Armenia and Cyprus in the last few years, and this is a major geopolitical shift from India. Usually we don't get into such conflicts, we don't interfere in such disputes and issues. But as Turkey has gotten more aggressive and aligned with Pakistan on the issue of Kashmir, terrorism and India's internal matters, India has taken a position as well, and is building a counter narrative by working closely with Greece, Armenia and Cyprus. Recently, India has started supplying weapons to Cyprus and as well as to Armenia. To support Armenia in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, if Turkey is supplying weapons to Azerbaijan, India has started supplying critical weapons to Armenia. You might have heard about Swati weapons locating radar built by DRDO, the Pinaka multi-barrel rocket launch system. Such critical weapon platforms have been exported by India to Armenia. That's why Azerbaijan has been critical of India. It has criticized India's role in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict for providing weapons to Armenia. So this is India's way of countering Turkey's support to Azerbaijan to exert pressure in the region and to counter the nexus between Turkey and Pakistan. Since Greece and Cyprus have standing maritime disputes with Turkey, it's only natural for India and Greece to work together, India and Cyprus to work together, right? So that is why the Prime Minister's visit was very, very important. During the visit, the Prime Minister has been honored with the highest honor. He has been awarded the Grand Cross of the Order, the highest honor provided by Greece. And the two countries have elevated their relationship to the strategic partnership level. Is that clear? They've upgraded their ties to the strategic partnership level with greater focus on defense relations. They're also discussing a mobility migration agreement. They're discussing a mobility migration agreement which will help in the smooth movement of skilled workers between the two countries. It will also help in tackling illegal migrants. Because see, European countries are facing this problem from India. From India, a lot of illegal migrants are entering European countries. That's why all European countries who are members of European Union, they are insisting on such mobility and migration agreements with India. It will allow students and professionals and skilled workers to easily enter those countries, whereas it will help them to tackle illegal migrants. We have recently signed such mobility migration agreements with many European countries, with Austria, with UK and many others. Similarly, we are negotiating a similar agreement with Greece as well. And we are also looking to improve our people-to-people relations and cultural academic relations. So all these key agreements have been signed, but the most important outcome is that India and Greece express support for freedom of navigation and the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. This shows the common interest of the two countries. Just like India faces threats in the Indo-Pacific from China, China has been creating disputes in South China Sea. It is violating freedom of navigation. It is threatening to break down international rules. It is threatening the sovereignty of other countries, just like Turkey is doing with Greece. So Greece and India have agreed to uphold freedom of navigation, which is a basic right guaranteed under international law and the UN clause. And both have agreed to cooperate to stabilize the Indo-Pacific and the Eastern Mediterranean. It's an indirect message to China and Turkey, both of which have a nexus with Pakistan, right? So this shift that India is showing in its foreign policy is very, very important. And again, I feel the topic is very relevant for your prelims and also for your mains. So this completes my detailed discussion of the three big articles in today's newspaper. Now let's wrap up the session quickly by going through three more prelims articles. On page number 1, the Hindu carries this image which depicts a very important festival, the La Darcha festival or the La Darcha Fair, which is held in Lahaul and Spiti Valley in Himachal Pradesh. So the topic is very important for art and culture. So let's see what this festival is all about. The La Darcha Fair festival, is a historic cultural event which is held in the Lahaul Spiti Valley of Himachal Pradesh to mark the historical trade links between Himachal Pradesh and Tibet. since many centuries, right, across the Himalayas through passes like Shipkila and Lipu Lake. So from the Himachal region, from the Lahaul Spiti region, there has been ancient trading linkages and cultural linkages between the people of this region. So to mark and celebrate the trade and cultural relations, the local people in the Lahaul Spiti region, they hold this fair or festival called La Darcha. It's named after a mountainous village where traders from Tibet would come to sell their produce, their local produce and their local products with traders from the Himachal Uttarakhand region. Is that clear? This is an annual fair which takes place, but it had been interrupted during the 1962 war between India and China. For few years the fair had been stopped, but it has been revived since 1980s and it has become a very vibrant cultural festival. In fact, this festival has very strong Buddhist linkages. So at these fairs, the local traders from Himachal and from Tibet, that is from China, they meet, they bring their local products, their local craft work, metal work, jewelry, and even their livestock, especially Himalayan animals like yaks and purebred horses, etc. They're all brought by the traders and sold, right? Similar festivals exist in Sikkim, in Tibet, and other parts of the Himalayan region. Similar cultural festivals are held. These are essentially trade fairs that promotes border trade. So this is critical for the local economy as well. Local farmers, local artisans, right? They will benefit by selling local products and local produce. It will sustain the local economy and it will also revive the historical links, the cultural trade links as well. So please make a note of La Darcha Fair festival and also make note of its Buddhist connection. Across this Himalayan belt, Buddhism is the dominant religion. Obviously, these fairs and festivals, they have a Buddhist linkage. Next, on page number 9, we have an article referring to the Chabahar Port in Iran, which has been built by India. Now, please look at the map here. India has always sought direct access to Afghanistan and also to Central Asia. India had very good ties with Afghanistan before the Taliban took over. We had a friendly civilian government. We've always had very good ties with Central Asian countries as well. And since these countries are blessed with natural resources, India has always tried to harness these resources for mutual benefit of these countries. But the problem for India was lack of connectivity. India did not enjoy direct connectivity with Afghanistan and Central Asia. Ideally, we would have had direct connection with Afghanistan through the Wakhan corridor over here in Gilgit-Baltistan. Wakhan corridor is a direct link that would connect Afghanistan with Gilgit-Baltistan of Jammu and Kashmir. But thanks to our dear friend Pakistan, right? It has illegally occupied these areas since 1947, and as a result, the India-Afghanistan border does not exist. Right? On paper, we still show the border because we claim the occupied areas which Pakistan has illegally taken from India. But on the ground, since 1947, we don't have access to Wakhan corridor. If we did, then we could have connected directly with Afghanistan and then with Central Asia. And of course, Pakistan would never give us direct connectivity to Afghanistan or Central Asia because of the constant tensions and rivalry between the two countries. So lack of connectivity is what has prevented India from accessing Afghan and Central Asian resources. So to overcome this hurdle, India planned a strategic project in Iran called the Chabahar Port project, located over here near the Persian Gulf. This is the Persian Gulf. This is the Hormuz Strait, the strategic Hormuz Strait, which is a choke point. This is Gulf of Oman, which further links with Arabian Sea. So India invested in the Chabahar Port of Iran to create a maritime link from where goods can be transported via a rail link to Zahedan, which is a border town in Iran. India wanted to be a part of this Chabahar railway line as well. Because in Afghanistan, India has already built a highway connecting Zaranj and Dilaram. This is an Indian built highway. India has built a highway connecting Dilaram with Zaranj, which comes right to the border of Iran and Afghanistan. So from here, if we could connect Zahedan with this railway network to Chabahar Port, it would form a direct link from India to Iran to Afghanistan to Central Asia. We even signed a trilateral agreement with Iran and Afghanistan. In 2017, India, Iran, Afghanistan signed a trilateral agreement as well to facilitate the movement of goods through this corridor. But unfortunately, India-Iran relations took a hit due to US sanctions on Iran, which targeted its nuclear weapons program. So as India followed American sanctions, fell under American pressure, India-Iran relations were affected, and Iran has suspended India from the Chabahar railway project. Is that clear? So India-Iran relations were affected because of the American sanctions, as India fell under American pressure. It dropped India from the Chabahar railway project, and as a result, this trade corridor had been compromised. However, the Chabahar Port remained under the control of an Indian company. Even today, it's an Indian company which operates a terminal at Chabahar Port. But finally, there is some improvement in India-Iran relations thanks to the BRICS grouping. As Iran has joined the BRICS, it's about to become a member, right? India-Iran have used the opportunity to resolve some of their differences. And one of the biggest difference over using Chabahar Port was the arbitration issue. That is, if disputes come up regarding the usage of Chabahar Port, the question was, how will we settle the dispute between India and Iran? Iran insisted that the arbitration should happen in Iran's jurisdiction, within Iran's judicial system. But India was not okay with it. India wanted international rules to be followed to settle these disputes. So India suggested that the arbitration should be held in foreign courts under international rules. So as a result, India-Iran had an issue on how to settle disputes arising out of operation of Chabahar Port. Now finally, both the sides have reached a conclusion. They have reached an agreement. They have agreed to follow the rules framed by the UN Commission on International Trade Law. They have agreed to follow the UN Commission on International Trade Law and settle their disputes through arbitration mechanisms as recognized under international rules. So Iran will allow these arbitration cases to come up within its courts, but not following Iran's constitution or Iran's judicial system, but by following the rules of international law laid out by the UN Commission on International Trade Law. Is that clear? See, problem for Iran was it had to amend the constitution to allow these cases to happen in foreign courts. Problem for India was we want international rules to be followed. Both countries have reached a settlement that arbitration will happen in Iranian jurisdiction itself, but by following rules laid out by the UN Commission on International Trade Law. So this settles a major issue and it facilitates the revival of Chabahar trade route, and it marks an improvement in India-Iran relations. Potentially, this could revive the INSTC project as well. INSTC project, or International North-South Transport Corridor, is a proposed connectivity project to link India with Iran, Azerbaijan and Russia to create a shorter route, because currently the route between India and Russia is a very long route that passes through the Red Sea, Mediterranean Sea and then across Europe. So India and Russia have a proposal from 1990s to create a shorter route, and 13 countries have shown interest to join the INSTC corridor. So Iran and Azerbaijan are critical to establish this connectivity via Caspian Sea over here. But the project has hit a dead end because of the issues between India and Iran and concerns over Chabahar Port and its operations. So if these issues are resolved, it will pave the way for connecting India with Chabahar Port and Bandar Abbas, two major ports of Iran, from where we can connect with Caspian Sea via Azerbaijan and then directly to Russia. So this is what you should understand from this article. Coming to the last article of the day, on page 10 we have an article referring to the Smart Cities mission. There is an awards contest called Smart Cities Award Contest, which is run by the government of India to recognize the cities and states that are performing well, to incentivize states and cities to focus on their performance. There is a contest which is held, the Smart Cities Award Contest, and the results for 2022 has been announced. That's why the topic is in news. So according to India Smart Cities Award Contest, Indore in Madhya Pradesh has been recognized as the best performing smart city, the best smart city in India. Indore is followed by Surat in Gujarat and Agra in Uttar Pradesh. This is the city ranking, the top 3 cities. Indore followed by Surat and Agra. With regard to states, Madhya Pradesh is ranked as the top performing state, followed by Tamil Nadu and then Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan and Uttar Pradesh. Is that clear? So Madhya Pradesh is at the top, followed by Tamil Nadu and then Rajasthan at the 3rd position and UP at the 4th position. So it's a small fact which might be relevant for the prelims exam or even for your state PCS exams. And also be aware of the key features of Smart City Mission. So with this, I would like to conclude today's discussion. Please take up these questions for your answer writing practice. Post the answers in the answer writing portal, for which link is given in the description box below. And also head to our Telegram channel because we have a quiz on these topics. You can take up these questions to revise these articles again. I hope it was a good session. I hope you guys have understood everything. Do let me know in the comments. Do press the like button and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So that is it from our side. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.